Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing my red cheese tamal recipe with you. I'm going to show you how to make the masa or the dough using the store-bought maseca so that you can actually modify this for other flavors of tamales. So let's get started. To begin, we are going to make the chile that we are going to use in our masa, and here I'm using chile guajillos, garlic cloves, an onion, or it's actually a quarter of an onion. I'm also going to use a quarter teaspoon of oregano and 1.5 cups of water. All of these measurements will be in the description box below, so don't worry about remembering any of this. I might forget to give it to you in the video, but it's going to be in the description. So we're going to boil the 1.5 cups of water, and then we're going to let our chiles simmer in there for approximately 4 to 5 minutes. We just want them to get soft, and then once they are soft, we are going to transfer them over to our blender. Make sure that when you are doing this, your chiles and the water from your chiles is already cooled down and it's not hot. You don't want to do this while it's hot. And then to blend this, I went ahead and added 1 cup of the chile water that we used. I added in the quarter teaspoon of oregano, the quarter of the onion, and 3 small garlic cloves. And we're just going to go ahead and blend this until it is completely blended. And once it is blended, I'm going to go ahead and strain it, because as you can see, even though you blend it, it doesn't matter for how long, you're going to get little pieces of the skin of the chiles, and we don't want that in our masa. So just go ahead and strain that or put it to a strainer. And as soon as you start to see that it thickens and you see the skin of the chile, we're just going to go ahead and throw that out. We don't want it in our masa. And once you get towards the end, just go ahead and add a little bit of water to rinse out any of the remaining chile, because we want to make sure that we get 2 cups of this red liquid. So just go ahead and keep on adding water and passing it through the strainer. In another cup of water, I am adding in some chicken bouillon, and this is just to make chicken stock. These are cheese tamales. We didn't boil any chicken to put into our into the middle as a stuffing, so I did go ahead and make some chicken stock using this bouillon. Now to prepare our masa, we are going to use as a base, I'm using half of the amount of butter and half of the amount of butter flavored shortening. You can substitute for using all shortening or all butter. I just preferred better this way, and we are not going to melt it. Most of the tamal recipes require you to melt the shortening or the fat that you're using, but in this case we are just going to go ahead and squish it or beat it a little bit with our hands. You can definitely use a hand mixer or a stand mixer for this process. At this point I just couldn't find the little attachments to my hand mixer, so I'm doing this by hand. And we're going to go ahead and beat this for approximately 5 minutes. You're going to notice that the colors of the butter and the shortening start to lighten a little bit in color, or you can also use a hand whisk to do this. To make the masa, we are using this tamal maseca. I recommend using this if you're doing tamales. And as you can see, my bag is a 4.4 pound bag, but I'm only using half of it, so that's 2.2 pounds, or more closely to approximately 4 to 4.5 cups. In my case, I didn't measure it out, I just kind of eyeballed it. So just make sure that if you are wanting to measure this out, that you check the description box, because that's where I'll leave all of the measurements down below. For the next part on the seasoning, I am using garlic salt, but if you have all-purpose seasoning, you can use that as well. Remember, the measurements will be in the description box. I'm also using this Nor caldo de tomate bouillon to give it some more flavor and a little bit more color, since these are red chile tamales. In addition, I will also let you know that I did add a little bit of salt to the masa. So I didn't add salt to the chile because it would have been overly salty. Now I'm adding in my baking powder. I am being very generous. In this case, I added 4 tablespoons of baking powder, and this is going to give us the fluffiness of the masa. For the cheese, I do have to say, as a side note, I did go ahead and make that 2.2 pounds of masa, but in the end, you're going to see me split the masa because I went ahead and used half of it without cheese and half of it with cheese. So in this case, I went ahead and used 1 whole queso fresco, and I use 1 cup of this mozzarella cheese. And here I'm just using my kitchen scissors to shred it a little bit because I didn't want to cut it, or I didn't want to add it to like the blender or anything. So that's like a little life hack. Once you have everything ready, your chile and your cheese, go ahead and start mixing all of these things with your hands. You can do it on a stand mixer, but I just prefer to do it with my hands because I like to touch the texture. I like to feel the texture, and just go ahead and start adding in your liquid a little at a time. So at this point, you should have 2 cups of chile and 1 cup of chicken broth. And you're just going to go ahead and keep adding it a little at a time, mixing, making sure that you mix the shortening and the butter with the rest of the ingredients, and making sure that you mix in all of that chile. This process of actually mixing in the ingredients and making the actual dough or the masa takes approximately 10 to 15 minutes, because once you have them all incorporated, you want to keep kneading the dough or the masa just to make sure that you have it at the correct texture. At this point, I started adding in the chicken broth, and what I did with that last little half of chicken broth is I did go ahead and add that chicken broth to the chile measuring cup that I had, just to rinse it out a little bit and make sure that I get all the chile goodness with the chicken broth. And at this point, your masa should be feeling very gooey, very sticky. It looks like you're probably doing everything wrong, but I promise you this is going to start to take texture, and the texture of it is going to change with the amount of kneading that you do. So at the point that you know that it's ready is when it still sticks a little bit to your hands, but not completely mushy. So that's why I'm showing you the texture here. It took approximately 10 to 15 minutes for me to reach this texture. At this point is when I removed half of the masa that you saw when we finished kneading it, and I placed it in a different bowl. So I'm adding the cheese to this half of the masa, and I'm just kneading it right in. Another more technical way for you to know that your masa is ready is get a little tiny ball and place it into a little cup of water, and if the masa floats, then that means that it is ready. So at this point, I added in my cheese and my masa is ready. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go ahead and make sure to cover my masa. I'm going to let it rest between 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Sometimes I let it rest for approximately an hour. And here I'm just showing you my hand. This is when you know that your masa is ready, when it no longer sticks to you completely, just a tiny little bit. So make sure to cover your masa very well so that it doesn't dry out. And I'll see you in 30 to 45 YouTube minutes. While your masa rests, you can take this time to dip your hojas in some water just to make sure that they are pliable for when your masa is ready. And after 30 to 45 minutes, your masa is ready. And what we are going to do here is I'm using my little spatulas that you've seen me use with cake decorating before. And I'm just taking approximately, I would say this is probably about a 1/4 cup of masa into each of these hojas. You can definitely make your tamales bigger or smaller. This is the size that I like to use, and I'm just going to continue. And for reference, for this amount of masa with the one that I separated and the cheese one, you are going to get approximately 40 to 41 tamales at the size that I am making them. Here is the other half of the masa that we needed in the beginning. So here what I'm going to do is I'm not going to just place the masa into a little ball in the center. What I'm doing is I'm actually spreading it, and I'm going to take some refried beans, place them in the center. I added some shredded mozzarella cheese, and then I'm just going to close up my tamal. If you see that it's not closing, just add a little bit of your masa on there, but this is only if you are filling them and you are not just making the cheese tamales like we did before. So this pot is actually not a tamalera or a tamal steamer. I actually kind of like DIY'd this. I bought the little disc on Amazon. I'm going to link it below, and I'm also going to link the dimensions of my pot below. But it worked perfectly because I only steamed half of the tamales that I made. So I steamed about 20 to 25 tamales, so it was the perfect size. I didn't need a huge one. So once you fill the bottom of your pot with water, make sure that it reaches like at least the top of the little holes, but not completely, because we don't want our tamales to be wet, but we do want to make sure that there's enough water in there so that it lasts throughout the 1.5 hours that we're going to steam them. Also, make sure to line the bottom with the leftover hojas that you have, like I said, because you don't want your tamales to be wet. And then once you have your bottom of the pot ready, we're going to start stacking the tamales very neatly. You want to make sure to give them room. Do not overfill your pot because these will expand a tiny bit. And if they're too tight, they're not going to steam right, or what happens is they'll overspill through the bottoms or through the openings of the hojas, and it's going to be a mess. So make sure to leave some room in between them. And what I did is I actually lined them up like this, and then I placed some of them at the top, just like laying on top of each other. And then to cover it, make sure that you use a wet kitchen towel. Make sure that it is completely wet. Do not place the cloth in there while it's dry. Make sure it is wet. And then after this, what I also did is I took like one of those Walmart grocery shopping bags, the plastic ones, and I just placed it over this cloth, and then I placed my lid on top of it. But here you don't see the bag, you'll see it in the next clip. Also, make sure to check every 30 to 45 minutes in between, just to make sure that your pot still has enough water. So what I did is I checked at the 30-minute mark, and I added another 1/4 cup of water because it is steaming and you don't want it to dry out. So in total, my tamales took 1 hour and 20 minutes to steam. When I had the 10 minutes left on my timer, which was for 1 hour and 30, I turned off the stove and I just let them continue to steam as they were without any heat. So this is how my tamales looked after 1 hour and 30 minutes of being in the pot. Also, as a side note, I did steam these in medium-high heat. If you notice that your tamales are, I don't know if it's too high, you can always lower it, or you can always turn up the heat depending on what you like. But I did it at medium-high heat for 1 hour and 20 minutes. And then the last 10 minutes, I turned off the fire and I just let them steam with just the vapor that was inside the vaporera. I did freeze the rest of the 20 tamales, so I used the blue freezer wrap from Glad, and then I just used foil and covered the rest of the tamales, labeled them, and placed them in the freezer. I really hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope that it is helpful for any other gathering or any time that you want to impress your mom or your friends and give them any tamales. Make sure to tag me if you do make these tamales. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as Berry Cherry Cakes. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave me a comment And don't forget to subscribe before you go, hit the like button and share this video with a friend, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.